Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo. On the program this week, King Charles hosts first state visit as monarch by welcoming South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, plus a 5.6 magnitude earthquake hits western Indonesia, killing over 260 people. We begin in the United Kingdom, where King Charles has hosted his first state visit since becoming monarch, welcoming South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to Buckingham Palace. The pair voiced their mutual respect and admiration for both the late Queen and Nelson Mandela during the trip. The United Kingdom is seeking to bolster relations with South Africa, its biggest trading partner in Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was greeted with the traditional British pomp and ceremony. That included gun salutes before a grand carriage procession to the palace. Following lunch with the king at Buckingham Palace, the president was shown an exhibition of royal collection artworks related to South Africa. He also visited Westminster Abbey to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown warrior and see the memorial stone for former South African President Nelson Mandela. Hosting the first state visit of his reign at a banquet in Buckingham Palace, the king held the cultural and trading links between the United Kingdom and South Africa and spoke warmly of previous meetings between the royal family and South Africa's former president, Nelson Mandela. The king also called for future partnerships which would help to tackle issues such as climate change.
It is only by working together across our countries and our generations that we will tackle some of the greatest challenges of our times. For instance, our collaboration in science and innovation is literally vital in order to protect our people's health by preparing for future pandemics. Perhaps, above all, we must find and implement practical solutions to the twin existential threats of climate change and biodiversity loss.
In his speech, President Ramaphosa called for strengthening of relations with Britain.
In times of uncertainty and instability, a relationship such as ours is particularly important. We are urged and, in a way, compelled by our common commitment to peace, stability, democracy, and shared prosperity to work together to overcome the difficulties of the present and prepare ourselves for the challenges of the future. We look forward to strengthening the ties between the British people and the people of South Africa through areas such as tourism, sports, arts and culture. Your Majesty, when it comes to sport, I think it is perhaps best that I steer clear away from the upcoming match on Saturday. And even as we seated close to each other, it is best that you and I should steer clear of that and not talk about it.
The banquet is a traditional high point of his state visit, with more than 160 guests. On the second and final day of his visit, the South African president met the British Prime Minister for talks at Downing Street. Britain hopes the visit, which had been planned before the death of Queen Elizabeth, will strengthen trade and investment ties between the two nations. It was also aimed at showing the importance of links with the Commonwealth of Nations, the international organization which King Charles now heads. While President Ramaphosa embarked on his state visit to the United Kingdom in South Africa, public servants declared Tuesday a national day of action and embarked on a nationwide march in 8 provinces, demanding a double-digit wage increase. This follows a deadlock in wage negotiations between trade unions and government. Our South Africa correspondent, Brian Pageni, has more on the latest strike action.
Several South African trade unions representing public workers have embarked on a national shutdown strike in protest of a wage increase demanding about 10%, while government continues to offer a 3% increase. Here in Pretoria, workers marched through the streets to the office of the National Treasury.
When they went to Parliament, when they were presenting a budget, workers were the PSP said the conciliation. We are not represented in Parliament, but they announced our bargaining rights there. They announced our wages there. They end up saying to the public, actually, Ribazami.
We are saying that this 3%, it is not applicable, especially with the rise cost of living. We are saying that 10% is the way to go. And then we are saying that we are appealing to the government to come back to the collective bargaining table so that we can be able to engage in a proper way. Failure to which, today it is just the beginning. If they don't want to take us seriously, we will go back, mobilize even those that are not in this platform, so that when we take it to the street, the impact will be felt.
Minister of Labour Thulas Nesi received a hostile welcome from workers who showed their anger at the decision taken by government to stick with their 3% wage increase. The protesting workers refused to hear what the minister had to say.
Do you want to hear the minister responding or you don't want to hear?
The minister received the memorandum, but the protesters had their way as the minister did not talk and left.
We want to protect the rights of workers side by side with them, not sending them to go and fight only and we join them on the point of victory, but we want to be with them from now throughout until their victories are won. And we guarantee the workers that as long as they are united, they will win. There's no government that can fight against workers. These are the creators of wealth in society.
We hope today they will listen because thousands marched here on the 10th and thousands are coming here today. Obviously, the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who is a former trade unionist, will listen to the plight of workers and come to the party to engage us as union leaders so that we find amicable solution to this problem.
To other stories now, in cyclone hit Mozambique, displaced people are learning to live with the effects of extreme weather and build homes that can withstand tropical storms, cyclones and floods.
Until March this year, the family had been staying inside a government shelter in the northeastern Nampula province until Cyclone Gombe hit in March and demolished their new home.
Kadangu kanga semwai uti kadanguka na medi la chitonyelo la shida uti paya hapo uti kulova uti paya hapo kulova lovanga uti kupandilova uti pavevi litanda medi shinda wika mpaka hapo katika uti mong'andya paneni paide imepo kwa nanga imbula ishida na imepo na paneni kunyakula shinwasha ashuti kunyakula kukanda tatulako baya hapo kubavira ngangolo yakuli hapo kutwa nguvikili hapo yakuli
He's now taking matters into his own hands, building a new home that should be able to withstand the southern African country's increasingly extreme weather events, supported by the UN Refugee Agency. We created a shelter with overhanging roofs around the shelter to withstand the capacity of the gale that can affect the shelter. We also improved the shelter structure within the structure that makes the walls strong enough to withstand very strong winds and rains. The family is not alone in their experience. Mozambique is home to over 1 million internally displaced people, and according to UNHCR, thousands of families have been affected by severe weather this year alone. According to an International Labour Organization assessment, Cyclone Idai, which struck the southern African country in 2019, cost about $1.4 billion in damage and $1.39 billion in losses.
Leaders of climate-vulnerable countries addressing the just concluded COP27 climate summit last week pressed for a loss and damage fund to support nations being ravaged by climate impacts.
The COP27 summit of nearly 200 countries agreed on Sunday to set up a loss and damage fund to support poorer countries being ravaged by climate impacts.
Today, here in Sharm el-Sheikh, we established the first ever dedicated fund for loss and damage, a fund that has been so long in the making. What we need is more trust, more empathy, and more understanding. Our world deserves this. This process deserves this.
This outcome does move us forward. An historic outcome, one that benefits the most vulnerable all around the world. We've determined a way forward on a decade-long conversation on funding for loss and damage, deliberating over how we address the impacts on communities whose lives and livelihoods have been ruined by the very worst impacts of climate change. So at COP27, we've established the fund that will provide one pillar of the response required to ensure loss and damage is addressed.
Delegates praised the breakthrough on setting up the fund as climate justice for its aim in helping vulnerable countries cope with storms, floods, and other disasters being fueled by rich nations' historic carbon emissions. But some felt the deal did not go far enough.
This is the make or break decade. But what we have in front of us is not enough of a step forward for people and planet. It does not bring enough added efforts from major emitters to increase and accelerate their emissions cuts. It does not bring a higher degree of confidence that we will achieve the commitments made under the Paris Agreement and in Glasgow last year. It does not address the yawning gap between climate science and our climate policies. The mitigation
COP26 President Alok Sharma was also critical of the final text in his closing comments.
Emissions peaking before 2025, as the science tells us, is necessary. Not in this text. Clear follow-through on the phase-down of coal. Not in this text. A clear commitment to phase out all fossil fuels. Not in this text. And the energy text weakened in the final minutes. Friends, I said in Glasgow that the pulse of 1.5 degrees was weak. Unfortunately, it remains on life support.
The two-week summit, billed as the African Cup, was seen as a test of global resolve to fight climate change, even as war in Europe, energy market turmoil, and rampant consumer inflation distract international attention.
A 5.6 magnitude earthquake killed over 260 people in Indonesia's West Java province on Monday, with rescuers trying to reach survivors trapped under the rubble as aftershocks hit. The quake triggered landslides which buried entire villages. Many children are among the victims, with about 80 schools in the area affected.
Bed after bed at this hospital in Indonesia's West Java are children injured in Monday's earthquake. Among them is Siti Fatima's daughter. She says her daughter was walking to the bathroom when the earthquake struck. More than 260 people have been confirmed dead in the 5.6 magnitude quake that struck the area about 45 miles southeast of Jakarta. Many of the victims are children, and there are concerns that that number could continue to rise. Over 150 people are still missing as rescuers comb through the rubble left behind. Residents like 45-year-old Aaron desperately awaited news from missing family members.
I'm here because I need to find my family, my sister-in-law. She was buried under this landslide. She was with her 2 children. I walked all the way from where I was to this place. When I got here, nothing was left. Everything was buried underground.
Another resident, Zainuddin, says his family all lived in the same residential area. It's now been bulldozed by a landslide that followed the tremors.
This is where all my family lived. My uncle, my little brother, their houses are there. The house of my elder and younger brothers have collapsed. The houses that you can see from here are mine and my uncle's. Only one section is standing. The other parts have been damaged. At least 6 of my relatives are still unaccounted for.
Electricity outages and 145 aftershocks have complicated rescue efforts. Officials are also warning about the possibility of landslide in the coming weeks.
Over the past 2 months, protests have taken place around the world in solidarity with the people of Iran after the death in custody of a 22-year-old woman. Also joining the movement is Iranian-born choreographer Pramida Zay, who uses dance to show her support for demonstrators miles away. According to the United Nations, more than 300 people have been killed in the demonstrations so far.
After the revolution in Iran, the Islamic Revolution, more and more limits were put on arts in general, including dance. And as women, we're not allowed to dance in public, we're not allowed to perform in front of men, we're not allowed to dance with men.
Iranian-born choreographer Pramida Zay left her home country for the United States a decade ago to attend university. She says women have not been able to dance in public in Iran for the past 43 years. These days, she dances in the streets of Seattle to show her support for demonstrators more than 6,000 miles away in Iran. The Middle Eastern country has been engulfed in protests since Mahsa Amini died in September 2022 after she was arrested for allegedly flouting Iran's strict dress code imposed on women.
I feel like from the day we've heard about Mahsa Amini and then hundreds of others after that, like every day I wake up there's a news of somebody being killed, somebody being arrested, some artist being arrested, and it's just a constant emotion of like grieving, sadness, fear, hopefulness. For me, the only way that I can truly express how I feel about everything that's happening is through movement. And I feel like it's a powerful tool because it's universal, there's no language involved.
Zia incorporates Iranian protest themes into her performances. Her music includes protest songs that have become anthems of the Iranian movement.
We're using our grief and we're using our sadness to fight. We're not just gonna sit at home and get depressed because that's really easy, you know, especially with the diaspora community.
Her protest is one of many organized by Iranians across the United States.
I'm just hoping that whatever is next is going to give people that freedom and dignity and respect that they deserve. And hopefully one day we'll all perform in a stage in Iran again.
In Iran, the current protests are the most forceful to confront the clerical establishment since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Over 400 people are said to have been killed in the unrest.
Since the nationwide protests began on the 16th of September, over 300 people have been killed, including more than 40 children. 2 16-year-old boys were among 6 killed over the weekend. Protesters have been killed in 25 of Iran's 31 provinces, including more than 100 in Sistan and Baluchistan.
Tehran has blamed foreign nations and their agents for orchestrating the protests, which have turned into a popular revolt by Iranians from all layers of society.
Meanwhile, Iranian fans and footballers also took protest against the country's leaders to the World Cup in Qatar as they kicked off their campaign against England on Monday. Pre-kickoff, Iranian players did not sing the national anthem in what appeared to be a sign of solidarity against their government's crackdown on demonstrators.
About 50 demonstrators, some from Iran, others descendants of Iranian expats, come together to sing and chant and show their country's colors while also clearly stating they do not support the government of hardline Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi.
We're today here for the game for Iran versus England, and there's a lot of motivations for this. For the reason I'm here with all the all the protests for the movements for freedom in Iran, all these make us come here and stand together for our rights.
Zendegi Azadi, which is what they've been chanting in Iran to support the protests, and it's what we've been chanting as expats, as in the case of my mom, or children of Iranians in America in the protests here. And so wearing this shirt to show our support for the country and the people, but not the support for the regime, to be able to root for my mom's country, but also not for the regime that made her leave. So be able to enjoy the game, but also to make a statement at the same time.
Protests demanding the fall of the ruling Shiite Muslim theocracy have gripped Iran since the death 2 months ago of a young woman, Mahsa Amini, after her arrest for flouting the strict Islamic dress code. Demonstrators in Doha carried banners that read, "Women, Life, Freedom," in support of the protests. The Iranian soccer squad also took a stance on Monday when they declined to sing their national anthem before their match against England after many fans back home accused the squad of siding with the violent state crackdown on the persistent popular unrest.
We come here to support our national team, but our national team are not the best representative of the Iranians around the world. And as you know, there are lots of things going on back in Iran. And as you can see, I put on just black shirt because of the people are being killed brutally back in Iran.
People of Iran do not agree with the flag, as you can see. You know, we have different ones, we believe in different ones, and then the anthem, same thing. We try to make as much as noise possible and keep it quiet for them, but I don't know if we were successful, but we did our best.
Iran's Team Melli, the national team, have been in the spotlight in the run-up to the World Cup, with many Iranians seeking their public endorsements for continuing protests that have become the most sustained challenges to the legitimacy of Iran's ruler since the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
And finally, on the program, Qatar has established a football fan village to provide mass accommodation for the FIFA World Cup 2022, one of the most important sport events worldwide. Qatar, home to 3 million people, is expecting 1.2 million visitors during the month-long tournament. Take a look.
This is one of several FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 fan villages located in and around Doha's outskirts. The village holds 6,000 container houses and can accommodate up to 12,000 football fans during the grand event. Amenities include restaurants, supermarkets, outdoor gyms, football pitches, futsal, as well as vast viewing areas for all of the World Cup games. Fans can rent a room for $200 a night.
We are ready to Doha, and it's a very nice accommodation here in this area. The room is very nice. It's a very cool space, and we have also a lot of places to eat, and we have a supermarket, some buffets and all that, and it's very nice.
Yeah, so when we turned up, as we came in, there's a lot of work. It was like a bit of a work site and then we got to reception, and it took about an hour or so. They're having trouble with the computers, but once they sorted out, we went to the room. wasn't too bad. You know, because they're new, turn the taps on, bit of dirty water coming through, but once that flushed through, it was all right. They're not brilliant, but, you know, they're only temporary structures anyway.
In case of inclement weather, like sandstorms or rain, which makes tents or fan villages uninhabitable, organizers have arranged backup rooms. After the tournament, Qatar says it will donate the cabins to lower-income countries or refugee camps to be used as houses. Qatar, the smallest country to have hosted soccer's global showpiece tournament, is preparing for an estimated 1.2 million visitors during the World Cup. Thousands of fans are expected to stay in neighboring countries like tourism hub, the United Arab Emirates, and fly into Doha for matches due to limited accommodation in Qatar. 32 teams will be competing to dethrone holders France, who won the 2018 World Cup in Russia, defeating Croatia 4-2 in the final. This year's tournament has been rescheduled to the Northern Hemisphere's winter months to avoid the intense summer heat in Qatar.
And that's the program today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.